Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
Welcome back, guys. Thanks for being part of the family, whether it's over on YouTube, whether it's on Patreon. The Patreon supporters, we want to thank you guys for really making this all possible. Or on Brightshute, Bitchute, and Rumble. And again, on Patreon, even if you are not a Patreon, the ones that we put up for all the channels you could see there. There will be Patreon only material that you have to be a member to actually see. But you could do that for as little as just $1 a month, which when you pay in advance comes out to $10.80. It's about 90 cents a month, literally less than 3 cents a day. So again, I wanted to let you guys know about that. There's so much distortion that goes on, and there's not enough in-depth looking into situations. And the controllers bank on that. They absolutely bank on that. Just trust the politicians. Just trust the media. Just trust what we tell you. Trust what your priest tells you, your pastor tells you, your imam tells you, your rabbi tells you. Again, just trust. Look for yourself is really what we got to get across in this world. And, here was a comment by Living Purgatory 3, who is a regular. I do see them posting fairly regularly. And even though they appear to be very, very much into the mainstream religious programming, they still follow our videos. Well, that's awesome. And, it's part of that awakening. So they made a comment saying, not true. Cave 7 of the Dead Sea Scrolls found many books of the New Testament. You could even find videos on it. They dated to 68 AD. The reality is, if you read Biblical Archaeology Review and you go studying hermeneutics, you'll find that what did Cave 7 yielded? Well, it yielded fewer than 20 fragments, little itty-bitty pieces. Where in the world do you get that they have whole texts? But this is what it is when we listen to propaganda, when we listen to, what they want to get across. They want to make people into believers, whether it's Islam, Christianity, or anything that they can use. They want to turn you into a full believer. So you can see, these are some of the fragments. What's that going to prove? Again, Wadi Qumran Cave 7 yielded fewer than 20 fragments of Greek documents, including 7Q2, the letter of Jeremiah, Baruch, 7Q5, which became the subject of much speculation in later decades, and a Greek copy of a scroll of Enoch. Cave 7 also produced several inscribed potsherds and jars. So, this wasn't even really, these were from the Old Testament and pseudepigraphal work as well. They're not really, they're not giving you full copies of the New Testament, but somehow it's in somebody's mind because of a video. And I searched the title that they said, and I'm not going to show it. You could search the title. The comments are right there again. Saying, this proves the Bible is the legitimate work of God. Again, it doesn't prove anything. You got shards, you got little remnants. How does this give you biblical proof? These little bits and pieces, but this is exactly what they found, and somehow it turns into somebody else's mind because they've trusted what they want to hear, that you got verification. They all date to 68 AD, complete texts. The Bible's a little bit bigger than that.
It is. And, what I see a lot of is people pouncing on other people because of their belief system, what they think they know, or what they think the other person should know, and, putting that off on each other. And we really have to me, I think we need to learn to get along a little bit better. Instead of jumping on someone, why not just get curious, or why not just, explain yourself nicely. It's like we don't have to go at each other. It's really not necessary. It's just not.
Well, again, but you do want to let people know what is really the facts, because again, in this world, all we get is fact checkers say, and what they fact check and what they say, just give it a little while, it's going to be disproven. And this is the reality of where we are. When I saw this storm jump over, it was just the little wispiest of storms, and it crossed over from the Caribbean into the Pacific, and then it started to head northward immediately. To me, this hits me as geomodification, weather warfare on humanity, and a lot of people have picked up that this is not normal. This just never happened in the past. But again, they're pushing an agenda. They haven't stopped. They haven't stopped pushing their carbon emissions agenda, because everything hinges on it. It really does. This is so important to the power structure. Hurricane Otis, Category 5, out of nowhere. Category 5, one of the fastest intensifying hurricanes in world history. And it did make landfall, by the way. 165 mile an hour winds, gusts of over 200 miles per hour. This is just mammoth and massive out of nowhere, and it has caused massive damage. And this is near Acapulco, a beautiful place, amazing resort, loss of life feared. Yeah, I mean, this is a mega storm. And the reality is, there are HAARP installations all around the world. They're not just in Alaska, they're down in Peru. They're in other locations around the world. There are so many satellites in place. Yeah, and we even have it declassified that both China and the U.S. have said they're going to control the weather by 2025. We know of Operation Popeye, where the U.S. in the Vietnam War 50 plus years ago, they flooded out entire villages, washed them away 50 something years ago. This is all part of the Great Reveal. But still, who do we have pushing this stuff? Saying, see what human-based, carbon-based emissions can do? We find the same people that have medical backgrounds that were pushing the plague upon the land, and everybody needs to do a certain thing. It's so obvious. It's the same group of people. How did doctors all of a sudden become, climatologists? It's almost laughable if it wasn't so horrible.
I know this is horrible. It's devastating. Let's definitely send our prayers and our well wishes to everyone over here. I mean, this is awful. If everything were natural, people would know to get out of the way. And I know there's some planetary alignments, and some are saying, well, it's planetary alignments could be causing this, causing that. Earth places herself in such a position. She's not going to place herself in a place where she's going to get destroyed. She's just not. So I do believe that there are influences that are natural. I see this, and every single time I feel it. It's the technology, because we should be able to feel just like the animals. We should be able to feel when we need to move out of the way. And like Mike said, this just sprung up out of nowhere. That's not normal.
No, it's absolutely not normal. It has a massive purpose, and this just shows you how little truly the system cares. The system doesn't care about us at all, is the bottom line. It's looking at us, and it counts us. Interesting too, because you'll find so much issues in the Bible about taking censuses and counting the people. Do it, don't do it. And why? Because they're counting their herd. This is the reality. And when the herd gets to a certain point and is unmanageable, then it's time to roll it back. Massive rocket barrage. Tel Aviv leaves over 1 million Israelis scrambling for shelter. The reality is it looks really bleak for the people in Israel. And again, we recognize that the people around the world are all traumatized. Talk about narcissistic abuse. Whatever term we want to use, gaslighting, they use it all. The control system is the founders of all this. They get it from the masters themselves. So fighting is ramping up. And yes, Israel's always pushed back. And if you haven't noticed, there's now closing in on 4 times the amount of Palestinians killed than Israelis killed. But the reality is there's many more times the number of Islamic people than there is Jewish people, even though they come from the same root, so to speak. Not entirely, but that's what we're taught, that they do come from the same root belief system. So this is just ramping up. Basically, what we have going on is Netanyahu saying, yes, we're stalling the advance until the U.S. gets all their pieces into position. There's so much of a shell game going on right now. I think that's a good term for it, a shell game. Where is that aircraft carrier? Where are we actually moving things to? As Blinken warns Iran that U.S. will respond decisively to any attack. Blinken is actually, I think, number 5 in the power structure, as far as what happens if Biden is no longer around. Well, then it goes to Kamala, and, she'll be the head puppet. And if Kamala's not around, it goes to the Speaker of the House, that we don't really have a definitive one yet. And then if not that, it goes to this one lady who happens to be a member of the few. And then it goes to Blinken next. That's how the chain of command goes. So this is a totally different place that we are watching right now. Israel strikes in Syria after rockets fired towards the Golan Heights. Again, what is going to happen, and many people are picking up on it, is that you're going to have a unified Islamic world. And all their faith squabbles and grudges and wars are going to stop because there's a common enemy. And the Libyan government told the ambassadors of the US, UK, Italy, and France to leave Libya immediately. He accused these countries of supporting the Israeli genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Which, when you look at it, that's exactly what's going on. That's what's happened historically, too. And over in Yemen, there's been basically civil war, with one side being supported by Iran, the other by Saudi Arabia. What do you have? You have Yemen ready to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to fight alongside the Palestinians. They're going to stop fighting each other, and they're going to head to Israel. But the big reveal is that Islamic unified army isn't going to stop at Israel. It's going into Europe. It will not stop at Israel. Israel will just be the first stop. It'll be rolling into Europe. Because again, this is exactly what was predicted by Albert Pike back in 1871. The U.S. Army announced 24 soldiers were lightly wounded. Lightly wounded? That's a interesting term they chose to use there on the drone strikes. I heard of deaths. I don't think death is lightly wounding, but again, they're going to always work to cover things up. And protesters at the Iraqi-Jordanian border decided to stop transfer of subsidized Iraqi oil to Jordan as long as the war continues in Gaza due to Jordan's support of the Israeli regime. Jordan's always been basically going along or, acquiescing and letting Israel lead the way because of fear, really. And again, there has always been replacing people with more usable puppets. And we see that, and we could recognize that goes on between, say, if you grew up in my age, you were used to the Soviet Union and, against the U.S. and NATO. And, there was always these battles going on there. Now, Russia again. But it doesn't matter because this is what happens globally. This is what happens globally. They're all puppets. When puppets don't, they don't conform, when they stop going along in any way, shape, or form with the program, they will be replaced. And we've seen that time and time again. Hillary with her shrill little cackle. It was just atrocious listening to her talk about Gaddafi. And here you go. Them, you must choose one. And then this is Michael Yon. Me, he shows the U.S. flag. And I put, better yet, just choose humanity and the planet, because you're not recognizing the bigger picture here. And I see Brighteon posted over there again, which we weren't following. So we'll follow. I mean, we follow him directly on Brighteon, but not on Twitter. You got to recognize the bigger picture. This is all just a means to an end. If you really want to start going deeper into things, study biblical hermeneutics. Go into the core. And I love, going to these places like the Stack Exchange here, because as people are really studying, mostly studying on a higher education level, they're coming up with the things that have caused so many biblical scholars to really say, there's something different going on here. It's not what I thought. And I've read books by people that have a dozen years of higher education studying, these type of issues. And yeah, they might start out devout Christians, but they don't end up devout Christians because they realize that this is not what's actually written. And, you got to go deeper. You can't just listen to your favorite pastor if you really want to know the truth. Although I'll tell you, Pastor Rusty, who was a Lutheran pastor, I used to seriously enjoy getting to discussions with, because, he was a pastor, head of a church, and he's in Texas. At the same time, he could easily go and talk about, the Hindu holy books or Taoism. He had a bigger picture mind, because he had years ago gotten to the same point where you realize, wait a minute, there's errors in there. Wait a minute, it doesn't really mean that. It means something totally different. But still, you take what's good and you utilize it. And that's what we need to do. And that which divides us, we don't need to utilize, because it's only going to serve the controller's purpose. Deuteronomy 32:8-9. Again, I've quoted this since I started this channel, and actually I've gotten into discussions with people for 30 years plus about this. When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundary of the people according to the number of the gods. What? They said gods. Yeah, the Lord's own portion was his people, Jacob his allotted share. Again, Yahweh's own portion was his people. Can somebody tell me what this means? I love it when people say this and they finally are like, wait a minute. God is one of many gods, and he got Israel. God divided the earth amongst his angels. It's got to be angels. Or what are they talking about? So it seems to depend on the word gods. And some translations have it the number of the sons of Israel, which is impossible, because Israel didn't exist back then. And Israel just didn't even exist back then. So you go with different, and you go into these different versions. The Qumrani version gives you the actual Hebrew right here. It's apparently how the NRSV is reading. Angels of the Elohim. But you see, again, these different experts have different opinions. One, Rochelle Elior, thinks that the change in the Masoretic version was made in mid or late 2nd century BCE by the Pharisees to the Zaki in the text. Would be interesting to compare it with the Sumerian text, but they don't have one on hand. And that's the key, going back to the Sumerian text, because again, the Sumerian texts don't come from Zechariah Sitchin. There's hundreds of thousands of them that have been translated by thousands of different people. Oh, it's just the ignorance leads to nonstop death and slaughter and destruction, and the ignorance has to stop. This is where we need to go deeper. So you can see they're looking at the actual Hebrew translations and going deeper into it. And we could even see the conflict among the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which was very real as well. And again, they even try to say, does it literally mean? Because you can't interpret it as rulers, leaders, or elders. Again, go deeper and really start reading the works of some of these scholars, because they don't believe what the masses believe. But it's even there that Yeshua taught in parables to the masses to just give them some, golden nuggets to ponder, but talked openly the secrets, the mysteries to his inner circle. Because a lot of the average people wouldn't really be able to handle it or understand it in the first place. And so, this goes much deeper. And again, it gets into the Elohim, which is plural. And it literally is coming from other traditions, which are all around the world, talking about these demigods or these semi-human, semi-extraterrestrial beings. It's a big reveal. It's always been extraterrestrials. Always been. I mean, you even have Anakim as a biblical word denoting a race of giants. Where do you think they get that from? It's pretty obvious. Anunnaki. Anakim, Anunnaki. So, it's just a matter of going deeper. And the deeper you go, you start to realize, there's so much clarity. Like in Enki and the World Order, they are stated to be a set of gods who decide the fates. And this goes along with what we look at in Greek and Roman mythology. It's thought that the gods view humanity as toy things. They're just playthings of the gods. And here you see the Anuna. The great gods have taken up dwellings in your midst, and they consume the food in your Jaguna shrines with their single trees. Household Sumer, may your sheepfold be built and your cattle multiply. May your Gaguna touch the skies. May your good temples reach up to the heavens. May the Anuna determine the destinies in your midst. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk divides the Anuna into 300 assigned to the heavens and 300 to the netherworld. When you talk about the book of Enoch and the angels descending to heaven, that's again a more biblical interpretation of these Anunnaki extraterrestrials coming down, settling with humans, and, creating a species that they themselves, modifying the genetics and making it in such a way that they're attracted to humans, and they are putting their own DNA in humans, making us more like them, because they are looking for a breed that will be very, very manageable and will be acclimated to their desires. King Marduk divided the gods. So again, the Bible is just a rehash and taking away evidence of the reality behind the scenes. The Bible is all about clouding people's minds. It's all about giving them a distorted view. Go to the Sumerian texts, and it tells you, King Marduk divided the gods. Now, the other thing to realize is Marduk ends up usurping the place of Enki, his father. And, this is one of the things that happens time and time again. Marduk becomes the top god, so to speak, at a certain time frame. They take titles and they take these titles upon themselves. But all the Anunnaki into upper and lower groups, there's some that stay up in the skies, there's some that come down and dwell amongst us, and there's some that are in the inner earth as well. And it just talks about stationing these beings. They're going to be stationing beings in the cell cities. In about 11 years' time, you will see them controlling the cell cities, the smart cities. So, again, the Gigi is a term applied to the lower class gods of the heavens. So you can see, look to these books. They give you clarity. And you don't have to just look there, because you can look to the mythology of many other beings that will agree with this. You could look to the Hindu holy books that talk about the wars of the gods, the Devas and the Asuras. And yeah, it's always been an extraterrestrial affair, always been a reptilian affair too. Many people are catching on to this now. Many people are awakening to this. Absolutely. So, the many different beings have been on planet Earth. Many different. As you see, these are very ancient depictions of Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag. Interesting how they all have the horns, is it not? Who else had horns? Moses. Moses had horns. Isn't that curious? Moses. Yeah, horns. Isn't that curious? Baphomet has horns too, doesn't it? Again, look to nature. And sometimes nature can be tricky.
And goats are always cute. Whenever you need a breather, go watch some goats.
Absolutely. Now, this little guy's a naughty little guy, and look at how tickled he is with that little trick he played on his friend. And then we have this goat over here that just says, I think I could fit in. Look, I'm going to go right here. You won't even notice that I'm a little bit different. Just like when those from the heavens came down and had offspring, they look a little different, seem a little different. But, this one seems nice enough.
Source bless and namaste.
Namaste.